Goggins has become one of the guys that's like, he's in everything because he's Walton Goggins.
Yes, and women are like, hear me out, I'm into Walton Goggins. And it's like, obviously, we've all been into Walton Goggins for so long. Where have you been? And
Since
also,
the unicorn.
Why are we into Walton Goggins? I don't know. There's just something about his teeth being too big for his mouth that I'm just into.
And the big forehead, his forehead is too big for his face.
And I'm into it.
You want to seal the deal? This is like the Pandora's box right now.
Okay.
Is him shirtless.
I saw that picture online.
It's like Vanity Fair.
Well, I saw him. I saw it when he was. I saw a picture of him with a bunch of other guys out on the beach, and they were all shirtless.
Well.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie to you.
Make it worse.
It's the same way that I feel about Shorty in this episode. Apparently, an eyebrow scar is just enough for me.
We are Squawking Dead, a podcast pulverizing programs beyond the Walking Dead universe. Sometimes we give you news, sometimes we make you laugh. Most times we go deep. I'm your host, David Cameo, and I'm joined by
Lazy Gardner.
And Bridget. You can find me at youtube.com/@punkybrewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER.
And today we're here to talk to you about the third episode of the third season, Dark Winds, titled Chiidi, aka in Dene, Ghosts. Yes, exactly.
Let me tell you guys about the fun little adventure I had yesterday morning. I did a delivery day before yesterday where I went to someone's house and picked up a package, and I take it to UPS store and drop it off, and they send it. So yesterday morning, I'm asleep, and there's a knock on the door, and Dennis answers it, and he comes in to get me. He's like, "There's sheriff's deputies out here for you." I was like, "What?" He goes, "Apparently you took some packages off somebody's porch or something." I was asleep. So I get up and I get dressed and I have to go out and explain to them that it was my job. Thank goodness I had saved all the texts and all the receipts and everything from the job. I was awakened by the cops coming because I had porch pirated some packages off somebody's porch.
Oh, did someone else see you and say like...
No. So what happened was there was 2 packages on the porch and I was only supposed to take one. Even though I messaged the sender and I was like, "There's 2 here." And he's like, "Yeah, take both of them." So when another delivery driver came behind me to get the other package, it was gone. So they thought that I had taken the package, and they had me on video taking them, which I did because it was my job to take them and send them somewhere else.
Yeah.
I had to spend like an hour yesterday morning talking to the cops about why I had porch pirated somebody's stuff off their porch.
Allegedly.
Well, I mean, I did take them because it was my job to go get them and take them. I had it all in my app and all
But they still got
recorded.
shipped, right?
Yeah, well, apparently they weren't supposed to be shipped or something. I don't know what happened because like I'm just a driver. I don't know. I'm just a driver, so I don't know all what happened. But
You're like that long haul driver in the last episode.
Another driver was supposed to come get him. I don't know. All I know is here's all the information, Mr. Policeman. I was doing a job. I don't know what to tell you. But thank you for scaring the crap out of me first thing in the morning. It was a great way to start.
You're a free woman, so so I guess it didn't go any further.
She's doing this behind bars. Don't you see the? It's too bright, so you can't see.
Damn! Now they know where I am.
You're like Halsey in this episode. Officers, don't get me wrong. You come in here with your guns drawn. What am I supposed to think?
Did that dude give you serious Bob Odenkirk vibes?
Oh,
like for real. I was distracted by how Bob Odenkirk he was.
It's his hair swoop, but yeah.
He didn't. But now that you're saying that, he's got like kind of the same like face structure too.
Yeah. Outside of the nose, okay, let's be perfectly fair. It's a big red sunburnt nose, and the everything's a little bit bulbous and
so you know how everybody was like kind of like red, and I was like, that's weird. Okay, maybe they're sunburnt because they're white. Maybe they're all Irish. I don't know. They're farming chilies. And I think that may have also affected their skin.
Farming chilies, air quotes.
Well, they are. There's chilies everywhere.
Right. And let me tell you from experience, you can make yourself red by handling chilies.
Yeah. So I was like, I wonder if it's also the chilies.
Also heroin.
That too.
How could you see the red under
dirty.
all the dirt?
Oh, it's so gross.
Again, obviously, this episode's called Chiidi, Ghosts. And relative to this episode, what does the title mean? Or maybe to the story as a whole?
Well, so I had 4 ghosts singled out. Of course, the first one is BJ Vines. That's the most obvious. ghost. Joe Jr., because Emma specifically says you have blood all over Joe Jr.'s memory. In the lesser category, you had 2 deaths. Suzanne, who didn't particularly die, but she was going to, and George, who is missing still.
Well, and Ernesto, but yeah.
I've got another one for you. It could be more like a metaphor for the ghosts of your past, because she in the barn finds that bulletin board. So obviously the chili farm is involved in some sort of trafficking situation, but
the cork board, yeah.
The cork board has a picture of Bernadette, who is a ghost of his past in the current situation.
Hold on, you mean she ghosted him?
No,
well, they're all CBP officers, it looks like.
Yes, correct.
I was super worried about Bernadette becoming a ghost in this episode.
That's fair.
She crossed the border between living and the dead. So it's a ghost.
And then there's also the idea that the CIA, they're considered like spooks.
Oh, spooks,
right?
yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So we've got an FBI agent that's doing investigating, but also Bernadette's doing this like covert thing where she's like pretending to be, I'm just a girl.
Playing up to expectations.
But she's really going there to do further investigation.
Meanwhile, everybody's doing the same thing. Budge basically says, not everything is as it appears. Not everything is a stereotype. Sometimes Mexican food is sweet.
Which I would argue mole isn't really sweet, but it's fine.
Mole?
Yeah.
Mole.
Yeah. Mole is sweet if you do it right. Yeah. Because it's bitter.
Not really, though.
It's bitter too, though. It's made from cacao. But yeah. It can be spicy, but it's not supposed to be.
No, it's not spicy, but I wouldn't describe it as a sweet flavor.
If you do it right, it is supposed to be sweet, though. It's not supposed to be as bitter as it's often served.
I had it in Mexico, and it was bitter.
This whole video on
bitter. I was like, I was like, this isn't for me. I'm not interested.
If I'm gonna have cocoa or cacao or any version of it, it better be chocolate and it better be sweet.
Sometimes the bar eats you, Bridget.
There's another ghost in a slight way, because where Joe hurts his arm is the same place it was hurt last season.
I was going to write that down, but I didn't. But yeah, it is. And what hurt him in that season, but the incident with...
It was when he jumped off of the ledge to follow the blonde man. He jumped off the ledge to follow him into the...
ravine. Arroyo.
Right. But then he found him. But you remember the whole last part of the episode, he was walking with his arm all...
His arm
holding his arm
broken, yeah.
And if you notice in this episode, he was holding it the same way. That's what made me notice.
More comparisons to The Walking Dead, because Rick used to always get shot, impaled, whatever, in the same spot. In his gut or whatever.
He's got some good scar tissue there to break it up,
I know. It feels like eventually that area would become impenetrable based on the
scar tissue healing over. Yes, and also... every time it gets busted through, it's more painful than the last, because scar tissue was notably sensitive. Exactly. So
it looked a lot worse in the last episode. Like in the last episode, I thought it was broken and like bone and stuff was hanging out. But in this episode, you can see it was just a scrape.
The way that it showed it, it looked like something white was coming through.
Yeah, I think it was the sleeve of his shirt, because his jacket tore, but it did look like bone in the first episode.
Whenever you lean back, though, you're like an anonymous person. It's really funny. Actually, lean back just for a sec. We have a witness here to testify against this.
Add a voice change thing to Sheridan.
The Border Patrol is like, I'll dub in.
The Border Patrol. And in this scene, the Border Patrol...
Tom Spencer is not to be trusted.
I feel like I'm watching an episode of America's Most Wanted.
Last episode, when we were asking what was the point of the fruit.
Rotten melons, or...
I noticed in this one that when Manuelito went in to see the chief, he was holding a tomatillo or something.
It was a persimmon. Well, let me tell you about the persimmon. Persimmon, or however you say it.
It's a persimmon.
Persimmon, right. A persimmon. It's a Pokemon. It's a persimmon. Oh. It comes from the original Algonquin name, Puchamin. I thought that was kind of an interesting... I was like, wait, why this?
Also, that's cuter.
It also a Pokemon, Puchamin.
That's a cute word. I like it.
Yeah. I choose you, Puchamin. Persimmon is the Americanized or anglicized name for Puchamin, which actually in Algonquin means dried fruit. So to Ed's point, they don't like it either. And, you know what? The thing is that it does leave a bit of a dry taste in your mouth
I've
as
had
an aftertaste.
persimmons, and it is
Yeah.
not tasty.
I don't know that I've ever had a persimmon.
I
And
like
if you
them,
get
actually.
them when they're not ripe, they will make your mouth go like that. Like it is
Oh.
the worst.
Is it because they're tart?
they're
Or is
so
it
bitter? And it's like
okay, yeah.
it's like they're bad, and it leaves this
Well, okay.
nasty thing in your mouth.
I
It's
think
really
we've
gross.
got something here. A little bit of a parallel. Okay, this is going to sound really dumb, so bear with me. Like the mole, if done right, it's sweet, isn't as bitter. But the persimmon, in equal fashion, if you choose it at the right time, and okay, here's another one that I didn't see before until just now. Similar to the brewing of the coffee, don't overboil. Using that sock.
Oh yeah, you'll burn
coffee-
the beans.
Exactly. It becomes too bitter, and she says it's strong. And maybe she didn't expect it to be strong because a sock isn't necessarily a great filter, or so it would appear. And appearances can be deceiving, etc., etc. Seems like a through line of appearing to be sweet or sweet at first, like Bernadette, but behind that is a little bit of bitterness,
She's a Sour
a little
Patch
bit of
Kid.
tart.
I was just gonna say that, Sharondy.
So I like that. That I like when a show can not only do a show don't tell like via visual elements, but you can do it via props or things that just show up in the episode that kind of give it a hint of what this episode is actually about. Forward-facing appearances. And isn't everybody kind of being that way? Just on a simple level, Garza and Ivan just pushing Bernadette to go out with Ivan, the songs playing in the background telling Bernadette, love the one you're with. Okay, stop it. I don't like it.
Stop it. She's supposed
But
to
she
go with
seems to like
Chi.
it. You know.
So the other thing I noticed was the fruit when she went to Spencer's farm and she was looking in the window. Those round things look like peaches. The round balls, it's just the way they're colored. And I mean, it just made me think of fruit. And when Budge takes the rubber band off of his money, the rubber band is a fruit company rubber band.
Imagery.
But what is the tie-in with Joe's visions of fruit and the fruit company? Like, does he subconsciously know something's going on? I mean, he doesn't know.
Or
But
is he being shown hints from the beyond? So this is what I like that you said Joe Jr. was one of the ghosts, because then you could tie it to Joe Lee Porn's vision of the ants, and the ants don't seem malevolent. And they are associated with the ant form.
let me say something else about the ants. And I was trying to figure out what is the deal with the ants? But then I remember you can burn ants with a magnifying glass. Terrible thing to do. But so what's happening is right now Joe is under the magnifying glass, especially with Sylvia. So he is the ant that is being watched and burned by Sylvia.
Can we maybe agree? We don't have to. It doesn't mean anything other than when we say it. That the ants may be the spirit of Joe Jr. He kind of says it in the first episode, I think it is.
I could see that being all tied together. The fruit is rotted. You're talking about them losing a child. That would be considered the fruit of your loins. Also, the fact that Emma wasn't given the choice to continue to have children because that choice was taken away from her through the sterilization. This concept of like your womb, which there's always like a lot of fruit imagery with that. Your womb,
Fruit of the
children.
womb?
Yeah, fruit of the womb, Dave. Yes. Yes, that's
fruit
what
of
I'm
the
talking
womb.
about.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason
You're
it was a
welcome.
cornucopia. You know what I mean? It's supposed to look a certain way.
A bounty of
But
children.
anyway, that imagery is all tied together. They've lost that opportunity and their child passed. So the rotted fruit could also be giving you some correlation to that as well. It's dark, but
It's really dark because if you think about it, you could view it sort of that way where these are the children that could have been in a way. Does that sound weird or?
no, I get that. That choice was taken away from them. Emma stated that she would have liked to have had the option to have more children, and that option was taken away from her. So I think that's fair to say.
Emma said that they were staining Joe's memory with blood.
Joe Jr.'s.
That could also be they're rotting away his memory with hate.
It's
Yeah.
like blood in the eye. When you see it, all you can see is red, or all you can see is that ghost is in your field of vision, so you can no longer see.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that Joe had said to Chi, did he state that killing a man means that his spirit lives on with you?
That was Senna, actually. And he tells this
Okay.
whole big story at the end of the last season about that.
Okay.
And I love that story, by the way. I wish we'd covered that season because that one scene about him saying, I was out on the thing and I had to kill a man. But when I killed him or when I shot him, I closed my eyes really tightly so his spirit wouldn't follow me into the afterlife.
Yeah, just
So
because,
great.
when Emma says that whole thing about like now his spirit is living with us, I believe it has to do with that kind of belief that you killed this man. So now his spirit will haunt you.
That's exactly what she means by that, which dovetails to that conversation he had with Gordo. Actually, and that scene happens just after her visit to his parents, her in-laws, Henry, and I didn't get his mother's name. Oh, wow. I didn't think about this until we were mentioning Joe Jr. and then the staining. Joe's mother is making fry bread for this wedding of the Atakai family. The Atakai boy is what Henry mentions. And he has 11 siblings and it's a lot of fry bread, but there is a bit of a bitterness because that could have been Joe Jr. as well. Emma's not thinking this at the time. She's just more like, Henry, get the F out of here. I have some firewood in the truck. Can you just leave us alone?
Grouchy old father-in-law, get out of here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I haven't even lost a full-grown child. I've just had the miscarriages. And when people get to celebrate things like their baby's first step or whatever, I think about it. And so I can only imagine they are constantly haunted by those thoughts that they'll never have grandchildren. They'll never get to see Joe Jr. do all this because you had dreams of what their life was going to look like.
Let me add a tweak to what you're saying, because I think what Emma's doing, she's choosing the community as a vehicle or an outlet for those feelings. And similar to her mother-in-law, she's choosing to embrace the community over what might have been and pours her love and heart into that. Henry doesn't feel that way, to the point where he says, I'm glad that BJ Vines got some Navajo justice. No, he doesn't say Navajo. He says Indian justice. But then right after that is the scene with Emma and Joe. And she's basically saying, but not saying, that's not Indian justice. Because if it was, that ghost wouldn't be following you around now, would it? There's a consequence to not Indian justice. It's not Indian justice. It made me actually think of, and I really want to look into this more, is whether like a court system or an adjudication or bringing somebody to justice is a way for those spirits not to follow you. When a whole tribe is involved in the justice portion of trying to adjudicate a crime, does that split the spirit among the community and it doesn't follow the one person for taking vengeance? I wonder if there's like a religious component to it. It's not real Indian justice because that's not what Indian justice really is.
Well, I think Joe is finding out what so many people have, is that killing the person that you're angry at doesn't bring back your kid. It doesn't make anything better. Everybody's like, oh, if I could just get rid of that person, I would feel so much better. But the fact is that you really won't.
You won't. And now it's made everything more complicated.
Right, it's made everything worse, and your kid still isn't alive. Here's the other thing. I get it, Joe, but wait until he goes to trial. Because you don't know. Maybe he would have gone to jail. You let your dad get under your skin, and you jumped the gun, and you did something that now you can't take back, and now it's unraveling.
Just to give Joe a little bit of cover, because because what you're saying is right on the money and it makes complete sense. I think it's less about avenging his son more than it is about, if this is allowed to continue, maybe other people could get hurt too. You're making it so that a man can walk free and do other things in the future that may harm more people, more innocent people, especially the whole thing is about mining uranium on the cheap, maybe getting more Indians to mine for uranium using unprotected equipment.
I think it's a little bit of both.
A little bit.
But they're broken, and he thought that might fix them, and it never will.
And what does it do? It makes everybody seem more human and realistic, honestly. Because you keep thinking, who wouldn't go that far, depending on the circumstances? It's a question. There's no answer. But let me go to the ants thing, though. Tying the ants to Joe Jr., let's just say. The ants makes it so that when Joe is looking for things, it leads him to a certain direction, to find certain clues, to help him find certain things. Ants has a connection to Native Americans in modern history via the code talkers. The way the code talking worked was you use a random Navajo, because it was the Navajo code talkers. Well, actually, technically, it was called the Indian code, but it doesn't matter. So they would choose a word like ants, which is Wolachi, but in English, it's ants. So every Indian word that represented an English word, the first letter of the English word was the letter. So you'd have a bunch of random Indian words that would just map out different letters of the English alphabet. That's how the code talking works. So ants was commonly used for the letter A. So Wolachi is A, ants, and down the line. So ants was commonly used as an encryption method. So I just thought that what are the ants if not messages to Joe? but also in Navajo mythology, ants are also a symbol of teamwork and cooperation, which one could argue you're sort of finally maybe starting to see hints of, because Chi's on board. And the only difference is that though Chi is on board on the law side, he and Emma couldn't be less on the same page in this season. There's no teamwork when it comes to this Joe Jr. / murder thing / whatever conspiracy is about to brew.
I'm super confused by what you just said. Chi is on board, but that's not what Emma wants.
It's like two sides of a coin, though Chi is in the fold on the law side, on the Navajo tribal police side. Whereas he was kind of airy-fairy and floaty and PI stuff. But he has him on that side.
Joe. Okay, you didn't say Joe, so this was like very confusing.
Oh, I thought I said
so
Chi.
I was like, well, you said Chi, and then you immediately started talking about Emma, and I was like, they're not together. That doesn't make any sense. But you were talking about Joe.
Doesn't it? No.
No, Dave.
Let's mine this.
Is that something you're saying that's going to happen in the future?
It's a fanfic.
I haven't watched ahead, but
that he's
I wouldn't be
starting to
surprised.
write. So
yeah, it's a fanfic. Lee Porn and Chi.
Didn't specify which Lee Porn.
It's Chi Porn. It's the ship name, Chi Porn. Or said fastly, Cheap Porn.
Oh no. Oh no.
I'd watch that film for like 5 seconds. Anyway, yeah. So Emma and Joe are not on the same page, and I'm hoping that as a result of their conversation, it's like breaking a fever. Now that it's said out loud that he did what he did, and she knows for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sylvia's coming for dinner. She didn't come to dinner this episode, which we were looking forward to.
I know.
Well, she was sidetracked by finding BJ Vine's body.
Which also, nice reveal.
Oh, the scorpion?
In the mouth?
Sick. It was amazing.
Those little kids been watching Evel Knievel.
100%.
With the 100%. Cape and everything, yeah.
Cape, the goggles.
Even doing the
revving.
The revving on his wheels, yeah.
I love it because they had Evel Knievel back in the day, and then it turned into Super Dave Osborne for us in like the late 80s, early 90s.
They were seriously going to try to jump that gorge. Thank goodness.
Which is crazy.
Dead BJ Vines just saved a little kid. That's what I'm saying.
That's kind of interesting in a weird way, because, okay, what if this whole process goes both ways? BJ Vines is in him, but a little bit of Joe is in this body of BJ Vines? I don't know. Sounds weird.
I don't like the way that you said it.
Like a yin and yang.
I don't like the way it was worded.
I mean, you don't like my other porn?
My other fanfic that I'm turning into a movie?
Leap Vines? That's my other ship name?
No, I don't like it.
B-Joe Leap Vines. B-Joe Leap Vines. A cheap porn production.
I hate all of this.
I hate myself. It's fine. Everybody, let's get on board.
Who's ever dumber? Who's ever dumber only after dark? It's like,
well, in our defense, it is early morning, at least for me.
The science isn't settled, folks. We're always testing these hypotheses to figure out the limit of our stupid. Okay, going to the beginning a little bit. It's two kids, just like Ernie and George, which is, I'm going to shorthand that one. They're on bikes, which the scene that they were last in near the archaeology site had a bike with the claw marks on it, with the blood on it. I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel there too.
Who hasn't tried to take their bike over some stupid ramp like that? Every kid in the world has done that at least.
To raise his hand
once.
Yeah.
Have you guys? Also?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I'm not over a gorge, but yes, I have tried to make a bike ramp like that.
In your head, it's like a gorge, but it really isn't.
Remember when Bart tried to jump the Springfield Gorge? That's what I was thinking of. About as good a turnout, too.
It was Hipster Simpsons.
After Hurricane Fran here, it downed a bunch of trees in the area back in the late 90s. And I recall jumping little trees and stuff on my bike. Like that's what we did the day after.
I'm going to ask you a question. Try not to laugh. But did you make a noise? Like,
oh, I'm sure I did, Dave. It requires much effort. And everyone knows that when you make a grunt sound during your effort, it improves it. It's scientifically proven.
Right. And, building a ramp out of rocks and a board is
Science.
It's the best kind.
It's science,
It's the
Charity.
best kind.
It's science, scientifically proven.
Physics.
I mean, that kid knew physics. He was like, higher. It's got to go higher. It's got to be
Test
steeper.
Steeper.
It's pushing. It's clearly rocking, and I'm like,
I loved
don't go over that
I love
ramp.
the steeper where he's like, yeah, he like test it, and he touches it so lightly, and I was like, okay. The 1 foot stop is great.
And he
Such
was
great
using a hubcap to cover his chest, so if
I
he got
know.
landed on, that's exactly what kids do, though.
It was so accurate and so
I was
funny.
equally impressed and also mortified.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's such a, because hubcaps back then were like, they were shields
Yes. Also,
for some reason.
for the children of today, yes, in the 70s, we were allowed to just wander around and go wherever we wanted. And our parents
yeah.
didn't know where we were. And yes, we were out building things like stupid ramps with rocks. And I can't even tell you all the stupid
Falling
stuff
out
I
of
did.
trees, and amazingly no bones were broken most times.
We
Mhm.
constantly were working on some new clubhouse or whatever while we were outside. You were always trying to build something.
Trying to do some sort of stunt.
I lived down by the marina in Jacksonville Beach, and we used to go down and frequent the docks. And let me tell you, that is not the safest place for a bunch of kids to be hanging out. I got lots of injuries down there.
So I wanted to discuss something with respect to Sylvia Washington. It's something that you've been, I don't want to say on the money, Sharon D, with your thoughts on Jenna Elfman's character, Sylvia Washington. But I'm starting to think, based on our conversation about coyotes and how they're tricksters, but they're also a force to be reckoned with, and also they can bring the rain. So they do have positive powers. They can benefit humanity. But the biggest point is that if you run across one, run the other way. It's probably good. And here in this episode, I'm comparing Sylvia Washington to a coyote. Because whenever Leaphorn hears the Negan whistle, is what we're calling it. I'm trying not to whistle too loud. There's something regarding that. And sometimes a coyote's howl is not like that. But I'm thinking maybe that's shorthand for Sylvia Washington. Maybe there's some sort of connection there. And when he's in the ravine with her, where they found BJ Vine's body, and they're talking, two things happen. One, instead of running the other way from the coyote, if Sylvia Washington is a coyote, let's say a trickster god, he runs towards her.
He curled up in a ball right here and just froze to death.
Lots of ways to die out here, Agent Washington.
Yeah, I know. But why would someone go to all the trouble of bringing Vines all the way out here to kill him and then not kill him? I mean, what kind of brilliant lunatic would do something like that?
I think you're making a lot of assumptions that aren't supported by facts or evidence.
Yeah, maybe.
That lit me up a bit. Because I was like, isn't that Loki from the Marvel movies? Yeah, maybe. All right, I guess.
I actually talked to Jenna about it because last night I was like, look, I'm having a really hard time getting a handle on Sylvia. I know she's not going to tell me, and I'm not asking. I'm just talking to her. Is she a bad person? Is she even FBI? Is she working for good? And this is what she wrote back to me. 2 basic pieces of information about her. She is one of the first female FBI agents ever. 1972 was the year that the first 2 female FBI agents came out of the academy. So she definitely has something to prove and is driven.
This is very interesting what you're saying, because as she's talking to Joe in his office, or in her temporary office, when she's saying what she's saying, she's fondling her badge, kind of like showing it to him, but like playfully, as she tells Leaphorn about where the body was found and who she thinks it is. There's this weird playfulness to how she's doing it. Kind of like, see, here I'm the FBI officer, see? And then it pans over to Joe, and you don't see her anymore. All you see is Joe's reaction to what she's saying for the rest of the scene.
I thought that was a really interesting way to shoot that.
Now, the first time I saw that, I was focused more on the Joe part of it, because I thought that was, like you said, Bridget, very interesting choice. Everything else melts away and Joe's in his own head. And we see what Joe is feeling as these words are being said by this coyote. I'm just gonna say that. And I love how that scene ends. But I mostly wanted to talk about the Sylvia part, though, because the fondling of the badge I thought was a great acting choice. I don't know if she was directed to do that. But like you said, it's to prove to herself and to others to take her seriously, but not seriously because she's saying these things very casually. But with her hands and her actions, she means it. She's just a girl. I'm just like you. Like she's flashing her badge to say, this is serious business, actually. And maybe you should be scared.
You
actually.
have to be a serious person to get in the FBI anyway, but I imagine being one of the first women in the FBI, again, I've said it before, you have to work 3 times as hard to get the same respect that your male colleagues do.
And this is probably what that looks like. It's not the direct way that a man would normally, and Bernadette's learning that lesson now too, is that, well, rather than going in like a bulldozer, the aftertaste of the persimmon or the patchament, whatever we called it, or the mole, right? Rather than going straight to the bitter, how about some sugar? How about a little sweet to that finish so that people can take in what you're saying?
Do you think she suspects Joe? Because I feel like, oh, no, you're the law around here. We're going to sit down with the other 5.
Oh, she suspects him.
Let me answer your question with another question just to screw with you guys. Does a part of you think that Sylvia Washington isn't real?
No.
No.
Small part of you, even if it doesn't make sense.
No. Sorry to burst your bubble.
Let me read you the next part of this because I have something else to say about it. If you think about white entitlement and that blind spot culturally, you will get an understanding also. So you have someone who is completely blind to cultural sensitivity and is also very driven to prove herself. She is there to do a job, not be his friend. So could she also, in the sense of cultural insensitivity, because he is not white, she is automatically looking down on him?
That's interesting because of the way that they filmed that shot.
She's way up on top of the...
She is physically above him when they're out in the ravine.
That's a filmic choice, by the way.
Yeah, I wonder if that was the intention to
Definitely
give
is.
you that.
But let's tackle this from both angles too. Because on the one hand, on a factual, on the ground hand, she has the lay of the land. She can see what has happened. She can see what's going on. So to answer your question,
Oh, she even knew the exact mileage, and they just found the body. 37 miles from his house. He's 48 miles from the police station. Right.
Yeah.
And it's that way. It's that way, and it's that way, and she's on top of it.
And also, if you noticed the measurements, the mileage between where the ravine is relative to the station and his home, it is almost equidistant, give or take.
It was 10.
7 miles.
It was 10 miles, I'm pretty sure.
A little bit under 10 miles. 47 to the police station, 38. I'm doing this off of my head, but it's in my notes. 38 to where BJ Vines lives.
Yeah.
It's practically equidistant. And so she has the lay of the land. This is why I'm not 100% certain that I'm in your camp, Sharondy, is because it's almost as though, and this is why I say coyote, because she's playing with him. She has the lay of the land. She has all the motive. I think there's a part of her that just wants to know, kind of like Bernadette, wants to know why, wants to know the root of the issue. And maybe there's a bigger fish to fry in this whole scenario too. And that maybe she doesn't want to pin it all on a Native American. So I'm not 100% sold that she's looking down on him. Yes, physically, but not metaphorically. I do agree that she is very culturally insensitive, though.
Well, I mean, again, part of white privilege is you don't recognize that you feel that way about other races.
You don't recognize the inequities.
Right. She automatically is like, he's a Native American. He is not going to be as intelligent or as smart. I'm going to be able to suss him out because I'm smarter than him because I'm white. In the 70s especially.
I understand that. I would hope there would be some level of self-awareness to say, like, I have been discriminated against as a woman. So to know that there was discrimination also occurring towards the Native people.
Especially if you go into something like the FBI, which is an institution where they're not known for their cultural sensitivity, even today. In the 70s, it's like, yeah, you're not white, you're just forget it. I'm not saying that Sylvia is thinking these in the forefront of her brain.
Subconsciously.
Right. Being a white person in the 70s, that was how it was.
So I'll say 2 things. To answer your question, Bridget, that would be irony.
Yeah.
Her not seeing herself on the other side, right?
It would, yeah.
But the other thing is, I'm still skeptical because you would think, given that she's from the FBI, she would immediately take him in because she has him almost dead to rights.
So here's the thing. Until this point, there was no body. And so if there's no body, you're going to have a really hard time charging for a crime.
She's doing it by the book is what I'm saying now.
There's no
which
body.
Makes me suspect.
There's no body. On top of that, I think what she is doing, and I think that's why you're seeing these, and we could consider them playful, but I think it's smart. She's trying to unnerve him. She's putting him in positions to be around her when more information is uncovered to see how he reacts. If you suspected someone who was in a position of power of doing something, you're going to try to get them into a position in which they feel kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of the same thing that Bernadette is doing with Spencer.
Even budge?
And showing up, acting under the guise of an apology, but then really pressing in when his guard is down. It's the same thing.
To continue down that line of thing, and this also goes to what Sharon said in the last episode, Sylvia, Hunter, and if it's a coyote places its prey in an unbalanced situation where a coyote isn't a particularly strong animal, let's say.
They're not very large either. I think
no,
they're like the size of a domesticated dog.
If the coyote can pin down its prey or wear its prey down, get it off balance, or place it in a scenario where it has the advantage, well, then, yeah, it could take it down. My further point is you could also see that from the perspective of what Alinda Garza and Ivan, now we know his name, who is played by Alex Maraz, by the way. Alex Maraz, who was in The Walking Dead season 10 as one of the Reapers.
That's right.
We had mentioned that he'd be in it in our lead up to even covering this series. He played Carver.
Oh my gosh,
Reapers.
Dave, he looks so familiar and I couldn't figure out why. It was kind of like one of those things where I was like, I know that guy, but I don't really know why.
He's a chameleon.
It wasn't so like impactful that I was like, I have to know. Oh my gosh. I cannot believe I didn't recognize that.
When you see it, no, I believe it because he's a little bit more tan in the series, and in The Walking Dead, he's a little bit more sallow and his hair is long and straight, kind of covering the sides of his face, framing his face better.
Yeah, he looks very different.
His hair is cropped.
But I mean, it makes sense. This is the 1970s. It's kind of a period piece that we're watching.
Hair and wardrobe is killing it.
And then also you've got a post-apocalyptic dystopian.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
So going on to my point was even those two, I'm not going to say are coyotes, but they're wearing down Bernadette in whatever manner that they can so that she can what?
Well, they're trying. I don't think that they are, but they're trying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's their attempt. Right. Exactly. Yeah. They're trying. But to what end? They're distracting her. Can we agree?
Yeah, it seems that way.
Just get along to get on. Live your life. I mean, it could be innocent.
Ahead, go on a date with Ivan. How cute. How fun.
You technically think he's cute. We all see the tension.
Yeah.
Or
as much as we don't want to.
They all know what's going on and they're trying to divert her.
That's my point.
Sticking her face in there. Stop looking into this and just have some fun.
Yeah.
I'll even pay for it. Sorry. Her reaction to that is delicious.
I wonder if her
I'll think about it.
Dinner with Budge is going to mirror the dinner with Emma and Joe, if that ever happens.
And Sylvia, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, because you forgot the one key witness.
Sorry, in my brain, I was trying to see similarities between Bernadette,
Bernadette
and Sylvia.
So appearances.
Well,
are
two
deceiving.
women in positions that are normally held by men. While it seems like Sylvia is trying to prove herself, Bernadette is too. But Bernadette isn't trying to prove herself for the glory or the accolades. She just wants to figure out what's going on. Whereas Sylvia seems to be in it to move herself up. Well, we don't know. But
that's why I'm on the line, because it appears as though at least she wants the full picture. She has it for the most part, but she doesn't want to only get her man. She wants to know how this all happened. This is why I'm like, there's a crime, there's a victim, and there's a motive, and then there's a suspect. But she's going beyond the scope of what she's meant to do to wrap this up. Who killed BJ Vines? Period. She's going beyond that scope. Just like Bernadette, her scope is CBP. She's an agent. She's not a detective. I'm not saying that's not her job, but she should try to find things out so she can send it to her superior, Ed, who clearly cannot be trusted, because when Bernadette brings up the idea of, oh, it was my boss, Ed, not Ed Hardy. It's Ed Henry. His name is Ed Henry.
Ed Hardy.
Which I can see.
Suddenly he like unbuttons his Border Patrol shirt and it's got like a tiger on it. Like his undershirt.
It's a tattoo, right? And then he's wearing a Von Dutch hat. And anyway.
Oh God, I hate it.
Then he goes to Flavortown for some reason. So anyway.
No, you leave Guy Fieri out of this.
When Bernadette brings up to Spencer that it was her boss's idea and not her, because it was her idea, he has a slight glitch, right? Your idea?
She said, what can I do to make this right? And her boss was like, well, you could go apologize to him. I don't think it was her idea. Maybe she was hoping for that, but
I think she was manipulating the situation to get back on the ranch property.
Right. No, without a doubt. But what I'm trying to say is there is communication between not Ed Hardy, Ed Henry, and Spencer, because
Oh, yeah.
it was her idea to figure out what she could do to make things better. Ed Henry gave her here's the thing you can do for starters. But it was her desire to make things right. It was all her, really. He just made the suggestion. When she says that and he goes, his idea, he knows that she's coming over. And he knows that it was her idea to make things right. So there is communication there. And furthermore, there's communication between Spencer and Budge. Spencer says, you don't have to talk to Budge. He doesn't have feelings. And yet, Budge pays her a visit. Why? He communicates with Budge. There is some sort of coordination between her boss and Spencer and Budge. There's a concerted effort to keep the lid on whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah.
There is corruption
Yes.
in the CBP.
Yes. That's 100% obvious.
I have evidence now. That's all I'm saying. I'm not like Sylvia Washington going, yeah, maybe. No.
Do you know what this reminds me of, Dave?
What?
I've been watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I think that Buffy might be the Vampire Slayer. That's what that just reminded me of, Dave.
No, you're missing my point. You're missing my point. You're missing a very big point. Bernadette picks up on this. She does this on purpose. She says that it wasn't her idea to gauge whether or not he reacts to that information to see if there is a direct connection.
Yeah,
it's not obvious, though.
Oh, I thought it was. Sorry.
Because we are we. Yeah. We're talking to an audience who may not see
my door
that.
just opened by itself.
Uh-oh.
Oh, is it Joe Jr. or
Oh,
BJ
it's
Vines?
BJ Vines' ghost just came in after me.
Damn, she went right to the dark.
Go away, BJ. Got no use for you.
Go away, BJ. Quote unquote Otto.
Otto and Dennis are gone today, so it wasn't Otto.
No, it's another stray.
Yeah,
she's got a
stray
new dog.
ghost.
It just walked in.
I say aliens, but okay.
I think kind of like what's bothering me is Bernadette, I get it, but you are being so obvious.
Yeah.
Scale it back a little.
It's not very covert.
When she was looking in the window and the guy went walking by, and instead of like hiding so that nobody saw her, she's like ran out and tried to talk to him, and he's like, "Oh, you ain't talking to me." And I appreciate that you're all gung-ho, but you've got to bring it down a notch because you are putting a target on yourself.
I think even she kind of realizes that. By the way, I love how she was trying to back away. Like at the end of that exchange or whatever, that scene with the Brando that went into the vapor cabin.
With just a gas mask, and he left his oxygen tank outside,
right.
by the way.
Notably after she mentions pig, right? He gets flustered and
he gets
drags
scared.
the breathers, and he just like kind of like leaves it and just goes inside. She won't get me inside the vapor. Anyway. But she backs away backwards, and she's like looking around, like all of a sudden now she feels like she's being watched. It's comical.
She's so eager to solve this mystery that she just doesn't think.
She overboils, perhaps.
Well, she's young. I think there is some naivety on her part. I don't want people to think that I'm saying it's a bad thing. It's not, but it does make me worried of her falling victim to this plot.
When she was on the reservation, she didn't feel the need to be subtle or sneaky because she could go to Joe and Joe would believe whatever she says and be like, yeah, let's go together and look into it. Whereas in this case, she goes to her boss and her boss was like, don't even look into it. It's not your
Well, now she doesn't know who she can trust either. So not only did you feel possibly alone leaving your reservation to come here, but now you are truly alone because you do not know who you can trust out of this group of people that you've surrounded yourself with.
She is a woman going into a culture that she doesn't really understand. And Sylvia is the same thing. She is a woman in a man's job going into a culture that she doesn't really understand.
Yeah, that's true.
And to the point, by the way, whereas we didn't see the dinner with Sylvia, Emma, and Joe, we did get to see the dinner with Budge and Bernadette. To answer that question, even Budge goes, not everything is as it appears. Not all Mexican food is spicy. Maybe this is a question more than it is a statement. Maybe I am not all as I appear. Because you see him at first in the first scene of the first episode, and he's expressionless, and it is terrifying. And yet, at this dinner, I found myself strangely attracted to Budge. But am I alone in that? Because
I don't know. There's something about the power he holds, maybe.
Right?
I'm not sure.
Maybe, but he is pretty charming, though.
When he left her there to walk all the way back to the border by herself, that would have been the end for me. You just made me walk miles back to the border through the Mexican desert. No, thank you.
I know.
But just like the children running around everywhere, it's the same thing. Just, she can walk back home from the border, right? Right. It's fine.
She was struggling with it.
Yeah, well, she brought the wrong shoes. That was all I could think of was as they were driving off, I'm like, you're in date clothes. No, your shoes. This is going to be bad because you didn't bring your own car and he's obviously going to leave you.
You just left and didn't tell Garza you were going with her to get earrings. And then you just vanish. You don't say, hey, I'm leaving. My ride's here or whatever. Like, you just leave. That's like them not taking the suitcase. It just
maybe you're not being sensitive to certain cultures, okay? Because maybe that's just normal.
No, so here's the thing. If I was going with a man that I did not trust,
Ivan?
Budge, I would maybe not say anything to my roommate in hopes that if I didn't come back, she would think, and Ivan did show up at our house, that she would be like, oh my gosh, she went with somebody else, someone took her. Right. So I almost would not say anything because I wouldn't want Budge to know that someone else was in the house.
Fair point.
That was what I thought about it. Because at first I was like, why aren't you saying anything? And I was like, maybe I wouldn't say anything.
My biggest thought was, what are you doing, Bernadette? I wrote it in all caps in my notes. What are you doing, Bernadette?
I'm going to answer your question. So similar to the way, but in a more exaggerated fashion, to the conversation she has with Spencer in his ranch, trying to suss him out. Is there communication going on between Ed Henry, not Hardy, and him? There is. Here, what she does with Budge, where the cars are parked, is also her sussing out his intentions. In an unspoken way, what she is basically intentionally doing is finding out, am I being forced to go with you? Or is this an invitation? Because she insists, he insists, they're the same people, maybe, sort of. We'll see. I don't know. There is a bit of a parallel to in the way they act. It's as if like she's looking into her future. Okay, not in the same looks department, but in that scene and also at the dinner, it seems to me that Budge is kind of like, or he feels like he's kind of like a more seasoned Bernadette, in that he's a lot more commanding. He's just trying to do his job and he knows it. I was hired to do a thing and I know it. Whereas Bernadette, you are hired to do a job and you are going well beyond your scope, the scope of your job. When everybody around you is telling you, including your boss, not to do something, you just don't do it. But she can't not do that. So when they have this little tension in whose car we're going into, the end result of that conversation is, this is an invitation. You're not being forced to do anything you don't want to do. Suit yourself is what he says. And so that gave her enough of the confidence, or at least comfort level, to go, okay, if this was something that where I'd be forced to go somewhere, he would have taken me by now. He's about to leave. He turned his car on. She decides to go with him because she feels like enough people know about this scenario, at least, that potentially safe, maybe, in this scenario, that he doesn't want to hurt me.
The way she was clutching her purse, knowing her gun was in it. I think she's still fearful, but she was outweighing finding the answers to her questions was worth the risk to her in that moment.
Right. It was a managed risk in her questioning, in her ascertaining of who she should go with.
I'll go with him and hopefully it goes my way because I really am desperate for these answers.
To me, that shows growth, though. Because normally she'd be like, no, and I'm not following you, and I want it on my turf.
This just made me think of something, because we're talking about Budge, and I'm thinking about where we started from with the way station check to now with Bernadette and Budge. And her conversation with Spencer, because she interrogates about, is this normal that you would have this other man, this security guy working? And during that conversation, she says like, hey, I shouldn't have checked the truck. And he's like, well, it's your job. He wasn't even necessarily angry about her checking. That's her job. Right. So he felt more comfortable with her checking and not finding anything than not. And so when she mentions her boss, he's like, oh, he said that. Okay. Apology accepted then. And he kind of lets it go. But now I'm wondering, did that put Ed in danger? Because Ed should not be pushing his agents to not check the trucks, because that's more suspicious and that's going to garner more interest and more attention.
Thus confirming even further that there could be, yes, there is a connection, but also that Ed actually is Ed Hardy.
As he's,
Ed Hardy's
he's an
a
idiot
creative
and he's
genius.
trying to pick fights in bars, probably.
No, he's just,
I'm
he's an
sorry.
Ed Hardy enthusiast.
I'm sorry.
Actually.
That wasn't Ed Hardy. That
No.
was Ryan Braun of the Milwaukee Brewers, who started his own clothing company that weirdly looked exactly like Ed Hardy's stuff. Also, he had herpes. Anyway, moving on.
You guys keep saying Ed Hardy, and I keep thinking Andy Hardy, so that's just placing my age. Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland used to play in a series of Andy Hardy movies back in the 30s.
Oh.
Love finds Andy Hardy, and this and that, and whatever. But they did a whole series of movies together where he was Andy Hardy and Judy Garland was his co-star.
Gal Friday?
Yeah, sort of. I just watched that movie, by the way, the other night. It's such a good movie.
Sorry to take us back to Ed. It just kind of crossed my mind while I'm evaluating this situation with Budge. Also, I have to say, even though I'm not a Mole fan, I definitely would have eaten it at that restaurant. You just know that it was good.
You keep saying it funnily.
What, Mole?
Mole.
Mole.
Actually, I think you might be right. I think it is Mole. But you keep swallowing the O. So I keep thinking you're saying Javier Mole from
Mole.
Argentina.
Mole.
I'm just saying it the way I was taught to say it, Dave. I don't know.
It's like how I say, what is it, the word that I said that really tripped you?
Mole.
You said persimmon wrong. So, like, why are you judging me?
We all agree that it's Pachamin. Anyway, so.
Well, now, yeah.
I wanted to mention one thing before it leapt out of my head, and that was as soon as not Thomas Hardy, what am I talking about?
Who's Thomas Hardy?
Tom Hardy.
No,
we just mixed an actor
now
because of Ed Hardy and Ed Henry, and then so as soon as Thomas Spencer finds out about, it was his idea, and that this was basically interrogation, he says something to the effect of Budge doesn't have feelings, but then the obvious response to that call is I have feelings, and I trust you know your way out of the ranch. I just like that. Budge might not have feelings, but I do.
Well, he seemed particularly offended. The you can find your way off my ranch thing was very much like, you can see yourself out.
Right. But his tone completely changed at a certain point, which is interesting to me.
Knowing how curious she is, he's just like, yeah, you can find your way off. You can go look around, whatever you want. Like, maybe he's trying to get her to dig her.
I moved to the trafficked people anyway, so I'm not worried about it anymore.
Maybe he wants her to dig herself deeper in.
I mean, her own grave, right?
Right.
Well, so I want to say two things to that, and one's going to lead to the other. One is that he keeps mentioning his family's legacy, where it came from, how it was built up. His grandpap was all sorts of great, from the coffee all the way to pounding sand to get this oil and working really hard to get to where he was at. But then I also think about he's really cordial. He saves Bernadette from that wild goat that was about to gore her.
It was like a ram. I don't know what that was. It was weird.
It was like a mountain goat and all these different things. And he's been fairly cordial with her and engaging with her, and he's entreated her, and he's let her into the ranch in the first place to accept the apology again, even though she was snooping around his ranch. It makes me think that maybe, I'm going to say this, I could be wrong, and I probably will be, but I think that maybe this man is being, well, first of all, extorted or being taken advantage of. Let's say a cartel comes in and says, hey, your finances aren't doing too hot, and I have a way to save your legacy. If you just let us borrow this one cabin that you can call a vapor cabin with all these balls that look like melons but really aren't, and they're filled with drugs. Also, we traffic women, because the heroin that we find in the chili farm could be in those balls.
That's true.
We confirmed a connection between the two in one simple thing, which was the corkboard with Bernadette's face as a CBP officer, by the way, sworn in on the day.
Well, it pans across it really quickly, but I swore that we also saw Ivan on the board.
I was confused whether that was Ivan, but I think it is Ivan, by the way.
Yeah, so
yeah, and it's full regalia.
It is the Border Patrol agents on the board.
More or less.
There were two more boards leaned up. We can't see them because they're turned around.
Right.
So when she is squatted down to look at it, it shoots a shot that gathers a piece of what's behind him, kind of shoots at his face this way, and so you can see behind him. And there are at least two more cork boards. Now, they would have been faced with the back up because the way that it fell down, he could look down at it. So if they had also fallen, you would have seen more stuff on it, but it was just the one that fell that happened to have Bernadette's picture on it, even though there are arguably more cork boards with more Border Patrol agents on them, because there's different points of access into the United States.
Right. I also wanted to add one more thing to that, which was it goes to Sharondy's point that the murders of Ernie and George are connected to this thing that Bernadette's going through. There is a grander thing here.
The way they could have done this season is it could have been two different stories. And I think all of us would have accepted that willingly, and I don't think that would have been a problem. It is interesting to connect it. But trafficking to this day spans the entirety of North America because it
Drugs and
also
humans.
happens in Canada and in Mexico. So
It's
know
entirely
everything.
possible that she was accepted into that job because she was from the reservation. She says that the Border Patrol was hiring because they were hiring indigenous people, Native Americans. But maybe she specifically got the job because she was from that area. And that was maybe like an extra connection or something somehow.
That's a good point. Yeah, and this is a holdover from last season. So that's an interesting drop to kind of make that bleeding over connection to why she's there in the first place. And also, just to mention, the two, Garza and Ivan, are also from native populations that are in the Sonora Desert.
I think it's in Southern California.
It's both. It crosses over to Mexico as well. I feel like I'm right about that when I was doing my research. Which these are kind of borderish towns, borderish tribes. So maybe there's something to that.
maybe.
And her being from the largest tribe, as you mentioned, Bridget, in one of our
the largest
episodes.
reservation, yeah.
Largest
correct.
reservation. That would be a lot of access. She would have that intel or whatever, or that connection.
We know that there is some connection now between the chili farm and Border Patrol. So we assume that has to do with the trafficking. You're correct, Dave, that it could be drug muling.
Right,
yeah,
on top
it
of
could
human
be drug
trafficking.
muling because obviously there's the spheres that we see, which are being welded.
Mm-hmm.
That could have something in it, and that it could be dropped into the oil truck because it would be
Submerged,
sealed
right.
shut, and it's steel, so it would probably drop.
And if they're taking all the air out, it wouldn't be buoyant. So it would just go to the bottom of the
Correct.
tank, which is why they weren't
Correct.
on top when she looked in.
Yeah,
Or maybe
which
she got lucky.
that could be what it's used for. I don't know. We don't know yet, but that would be my assumption.
Oh, no, they're just balls so that when they rattle around the truck, the oil doesn't get sediment. You know, it doesn't fall to the bottom. It's like a spray can, you know?
I don't know enough about oil operations to
Like
know
dryer
why
balls
else you
for
would
oil
need
tankers.
that. We're using the guise of a chili farm. Now, I assumed based on the way that they were talking that it was just a commune. That automatically was my thought process. I was like,
I'm
this
so
is
glad
a
you're going here.
cult.
The looks on their faces as they pan the crowd.
It's not like a nice commune. It's like a creepy
Manson
commune.
family vibes.
Just the fact that Suzanne continues to look at him after everything that she says is off-putting. The fact that all those people are in the background but refuse to change facial expressions, and also way to go casting, because you found some real weirdos to stand back there.
They're all dirty. Take a bath.
They're all covered in dirt. Yeah, they're all covered in dirt, and then
They're all farming,
red.
everybody. Come on, everybody. So judgmental. Coastal elites.
He said we are a small farm at least 4
He
times.
kept saying it, though.
It
Yeah, that
sounded
was the thing.
so practiced. This
It
is what
did.
I'm supposed to say. We're
It
a
did. It
small
was
farm.
weird.
We're just farmers, but we're just a small farm. We're only farmers. We're only farmers. This is just a small farm. Dude, we get it.
Does anybody know what the BLM acronym means?
Yeah, Bureau of Land Management.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
is parceled off land for
Okay.
whatever purpose the Bureau
I couldn't
wants.
figure out what it was.
They also manage the Mustang populations and such.
For all sorts of different, mostly wildlife purposes, but
Okay.
also livestock
So
and
like an
whatnot.
agricultural situation.
Yeah, department. It's
Okay.
federal too, by the way. It's good to keep in mind. Oh, well, that's a connection.
Committing
I didn't
crimes
even
on
think about
federal
that.
land leads to higher sentencing, but you do you, bro.
Also indicates perhaps a larger coordination with the U.S. government.
Yes.
If there is some sort of corruption, which is bigger than just state.
Possible. I also assumed that we were going to find everybody inside the house
I thought that too.
Well,
having drunk
yeah.
the flavor aid.
Well, I looked into this a little bit, by the way. She says the car was registered in Amarillo, Texas, and then it made me want to look at cults that were prevalent in the 1970s. One of the cults, and the only cult that I found, might be mimicking at least this cult group led by Terry Hoffman in Dallas, Texas, called the Conscious Development of Body, Mind, and Soul. The
That
cult,
screams cult.
Why I chose this cult over some of the others that were suggested by some of the Dallas conspiracy theorists or whatnot, because there was some crazy stuff out there. The followers would fight against, this is their thing. Followers fight against spiritual entities called Black Lords, in quotes. I put them in quotes. And who does that sound like if not the people of darkness? No, I thought that was a little bit of a weird
Oh.
thing,
Sure.
even though the people of darkness is the white man's native cult thing. PJ Vines?
The Monster Joe keeps seeing maybe he is a Black Lord.
Oh, well, yeah, because we kept saying skinwalkers, but we really don't know if that's the thing. And I wrote in my notes, people of darkness and much. Now, the reason why they did this is that they believed they could join God and the 12 masters through reincarnation. I don't know if that has any relevance, but this got me down a path of appearances aren't always as they seem, because I wondered. Now, the obvious thing is that this Halsey, the fellow that talks down Joe and Chi.
You just want everybody to be a Hardy in this.
Yeah, his name is Halsey. Now, he's obviously creepy and weird and whatnot. And Suzanne is the girl who owns the truck, holds his hand, and he was with me all night and all that stuff. Then she decides to call him and meet him at this old trading post. There's some route that I wrote down, but I'm like, that's not important. And then they have this conversation. Now, if you take into account that this cult was formed by a woman named Terry Hoffman, the conscious mind people, body peoples, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be a cool and completely unexpected flip that Suzanne is actually the one in charge, and she gives her just enough dosage to keep her strung out in such a way that Joe himself would believe that, oh, Halsey tried to overdose me, and she's conveniently in the back of the barn. Everybody else is gone but her. But, oh, it was because she betrayed me, Halsey says in our minds. So I had to make believe that she overdosed and all this stuff. I thought to myself, what if she is the one in charge? She's the cult leader, and she told Halsey exactly what to do. How was he even able to get away if not for her being the distraction, putting herself in harm's way? And of course, Joe takes the bait. He sees the wounded animal in her, or at least what the coyote wants her to believe.
I really like that theory.
He gets angry.
Well, if we're going into the women taking charge kind of thing, like we got with Sylvia and with Bernadette, so then you have another one who's also taking charge just in a bad direction.
Right, in a villainous, right. That's what flipped my switch. It was like, okay, this existed. She was the cult leader.
Not being a man, but having experienced men for 53 years, men tend to have a certain way of looking at women, especially in the 70s. They're not smart enough. They're just women, which I don't know that Joe feels that way. I mean, obviously Bernadette is his protege and all that.
And surrogate daughter, practically.
Right, but it's something that's ingrained in men through society that women are the weaker sex. Jerry Ryan's character even said it. Why wouldn't nobody would believe that, a little old me?
There's a lot of reasons behind it too, like the Terry Hoffman thing, like the wounded animal thing, the women are the weaker sex, and Bernadette learning to adapt, putting lipstick on. It did make me feel a little bit cringe when Garza said that, and then she did it. But I got mixed feelings about it because, and this will go to a larger point about how I prejudged Ivan 100%. I looked at him, I saw, oh, it's just, I'll even buy you dinner. And he says the thing in the last episode. This happens twice. He says, I am taking you seriously, first of all, in this episode. In the last episode, he says something, this girl has my back, or, or you're not making it easy and all that stuff. So I cringed and I was like, ugh, this guy. But then I thought, let's say Ivan does know what's happening under his nose and does not have the will like Bernadette to suss it out and stick his nose in where it doesn't belong. But maybe he is this way because he actually cares about Bernadette and does not want her to get hurt. I know it does sound patronizing and whatnot, but if she's dealing with forces that she does not have the equipment to deal with at the present moment, at the very least, when he says, I am taking you seriously, but he's doing it in an unserious way. Like, let's get drinks later with the Shaka thing. He's doing that, I think, to protect her in his own way. We can take things seriously, but keep the boil down a little bit so that we can think things through maybe, but he's not saying it outright. So it does make me feel a little bit differently about him. He does pick her up at the border. I mean, yeah, you could say men will do anything for booty, and that may be true in this case, but I am starting to sense a little bit more altruism from Ivan, and that not everything is as it appears, and that maybe he does seem like a scuzzy, weird playboy type, but then maybe that's all a sham, and maybe that is his whole modus operandi is really to protect Bernadette in the only way he knows how, sounding like a misogynist. Maybe.
We also don't know a whole lot about his past yet.
We didn't even know his name until this episode.
We know what drives Bernadette, her in her past, being taken from the res and forced to go into the school. I guess that shaped her vision of justice. It was unjust for this to happen to me, she sees the women being trafficked,
taken.
like her. Like, maybe we don't know that she was sexually exploited or anything like that, although that did happen in those schools. But just the fact that she was taken and forced to do this against her will, she has a strong feeling about women being forced to do things against their will, like being trafficked. Whereas Ivan, and maybe even Garza, maybe they don't have that draw. Maybe they weren't forced to go to schools. They were in different tribes. And they seem a little more worldly than she is. She's really naive about what society is. And I don't think they are. They have lived in society and been part of it. Yes, he's protecting her, but he also doesn't get her drive because he doesn't have it. He didn't have the same push that she
experience
did.
as she does. Yeah. Let's go a little further with that, because you're hitting on something that I did think about, but I didn't think was going to be relevant. Who is the unusual person in at least this scenario? Isn't it Bernadette?
Yeah.
Because if you really think about it, when we talk about like Indian justice and Navajo justice or whatnot, that comes from a portion of, well, I'm not going to get it, so I might as well take it. And that's just a select few of people who think something has to happen, something's got to break. And so they think they have to go that way, the crime way, let's say the murder way or whatever it's going to be, or I got to steal it back or whatnot. And that's a select few people. These two people are a picture of what it's like to have to get along to get on. And I can identify with that. My parents were in the Middle East, Syrian nationals, Jews, but we were citizens, but not citizens. We had a special ID that indicated that we were Jewish as opposed to just being Syrian citizens. But at the same time, things would happen to us. Words were said in the street all the time. And yet we got along to get on. We knew that we weren't going to get the justice if things happened to us. And we didn't break the law to get revenge or anything like that. We didn't foment rebellions or revolutions or whatnot. We just wanted to live. And so I completely understand their point of view as characters, that they are the picture, and even Shorty to a certain extent, even though Shorty has a different experience, Shorty Bowlegs. But the large part of people who live on the reservation feel like they're not going to get justice in this world. So we might as well find a way to live with that. And that's Linda and Ivan. They're a picture of what that's like. Just keep your head down, do your job, listen to your boss.
Assimilate yourself into white society. That's how you fit in, because they don't talk about ceremonies, or I haven't heard them say anything about anything like that. It seems to me, in the little that we know of them, that they have pretty much eschewed their native histories.
It's similar to the way that she was when we first met him.
Right.
It's the trying to do what is quote unquote normal.
It's what I had to do
in American culture. To make it in the white man's world, you have to
fit in.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah.
It's what my parents did that less, but it's what I felt like I had to do. I was given strange foods for lunch. I was wearing different clothes.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of first generation Americans have that same conflict. You grow up with a different language in your house, but you're like, I gotta be like normal at school, or they're gonna bully me or whatever.
Give me a cheese sandwich, please.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's really common. That's really common for first generation Americans.
Come on, man. It's gross.
I'm sure it's that way in the reverse. If you're an American going to a foreign country, but you're a first generation in that country, you have to do the same thing. You have to be able to fit in with them.
I did want to talk a little bit about the scene between Chi and Shorty, because we didn't get a lot of Jim Chi in this episode, much like the entire season has been so far. This is not Chi-centric.
Yes, he's been very background.
Yeah, he's been like a secondary character, which is interesting because he was forefront in both season 1 and in season 2. It's him and Lee Porn against whoever else, and Bernadette is kind of the sidelined character. Hers is the B plot. But in this, Chi is kind of the B plot, and Bernadette's story and Lee Porn's story is really what's like driving the episodes. But to see him go back and talk to Shorty as a friend was so interesting and so cool. And the reason I say as a friend, Dave, is because why else is he there?
She saw my face.
Okay, why else is he there? I know you gave a little eye roll. I don't appreciate it.
It was like a head nod. It was like, yeah, maybe.
Why else is he there? On top of that, when Shorty talks about being a father, it becomes very obvious in this conversation. George is very much a child of the era. He goes off, he does what he wants. His parents don't really know what he's doing or where he is. And that at the time was normal. But when you're pressed because something has happened to your child, I can only imagine the guilt that you begin to feel about how, like, if you had only been a little more involved, if you had only done a little bit more, then you would maybe know where your kid is, or they would maybe be safe. And we get this little interaction where Shorty's saying,
it's his fault, essentially.
Yeah,
if I hadn't yelled at him, maybe
Shorty
would
is saying,
stay
like,
home more. Yeah.
these boys used to piss me off so much when they were here, and I would start talking to them and I would be yelling them or chastising them or whatever. And my father's words were coming out of my mouth, which I honestly, I think has probably happened to all of us who have interacted with small children. Unfortunately, my mother's voice has come straight out of my mouth. I love my mom. It's not like she did anything wrong, but nobody is perfect. And so to hear that and know that sometimes those words had consequences that were undesired or unintentional, to me, I don't want to do that to a child. And from what it sounds like, Shorty's father, it wasn't a great situation.
Like, they were both veterans, I think it was.
It wasn't a great situation.
One was Korean, one was Nam?
I believe so.
More or less.
And
I know he mentioned the Bronze Star in the last episode.
And so he's feeling bad about this interaction. And this is why I believe that she has now become a friend. Because knowing how Shorty's father was, he goes out of his way to say, you are not him.
Not by a mile. Dad busted the front teeth of my mother's mouth when he was angry. Yeah. You didn't do that to these kids.
You are not him. That to me shows like a level of growth in Chi that, considering where he was at in the last episode to now, is pretty big emotional growth for him to accept that they didn't get along as kids, but they're adults now. This guy's struggling. He's suffering.
Ghosts. You're exercising that ghost, and it takes time. And I like that it did take time. Like, he gave, over the course of the last episode, there was that, it's him. I know it's him. It's the way he is. His dad was like this. There's a cycle of violence does pass intergenerationally because of learned behavior and how my father made me feel this way. And then, so I learned from him how to love and all that stuff. But there was something in the activity that was going on too with the car. What was he hitting that whole time? And what was he about to do? He felt like George was dead.
It's stripped. That's why he's hitting it like that.
Oh, yeah, at first, right? But then he just hits the thing. It's the starter motor is what he's hitting. That's common practice. You do it for a couple of reasons. For newer cars, it's to rock the solenoid to get it started. Sometimes old cars, you have to kind of hit it. But with some starter motors, you do it to unstick the starter brushes, I think it is. The brushes will get stuck. So if you hit the starter motor, it'll allow the car to turn over, is what the expression is, right? You turn over the car. It's like turning over a new leaf. I thought that was kind of an interesting way of looking at the situation, because what he was effectively saying, Shorty, A, it's my fault, and B, George is probably dead. It's his way of saying, I'm despairing and it's my fault. Like you said, maybe I could have not acted like my father a little less, right? Or not at all. And then she decides and takes it upon himself to say, we don't know that. Like you said, he is a survivor. You taught him how to chop wood and survive out there for extended period of time, to know what to look for, to take care of yourself in the elements. We don't know that. So there is some good that you gave to that boy before he went missing. And then so when he knocks the starter, it's him saying, okay, I'm still in this fight. We can start this engine up. I'm not giving up on this car, aka me.
Probably the belief that should George come back, that he'll be the father that he knows George deserves.
To start again, to turn over, right? Yeah. In seeing that and seeing these two, the words and the actions come to, I actually got me caught up a little bit, and I was like, we're not doing this today, David. We're not doing this. We're going to keep going on first. We're not doing it. Keep going. But it was pretty beautiful. And to your point, even though he's been a C character, that scene was really important to the overnight. Oh, and it does connect to. It does
connect to the main
Garza,
the main story. Yeah, it does. It's just interesting to see
to get along, to get on,
in the background a little bit more this season.
I'm glad that hopped in though. That there's a connective tissue to the idea of, well, can we still get along to get on? Go with the motions, just try to live, or do we actually hope for something better?
Yeah,
I think that's important. Again, like in the last episode, A, I felt more immersed because of, I understood why I felt more immersed. And then B, there is something about the season that's a bit more, they've built the world out to a degree where they can start playing with these narratives that have been threaded from prior seasons, and they can actually play with bigger narratives. They're a lot more exciting and a lot more emotional, and take these characters that we've started to learn more about and a bigger journey of growth, because throughout these entire series, you find these characters in situations where they're put into almost impossible situations, or they put themselves into impossible situations, and they're not perfect beings. They are unusual beings. Even Joe Leaphorn is an unusual being, almost putting himself in the coyote's mouth when it comes to Sylvia Washington. No, you're supposed to turn the other way. Why are you doing this behavior? I just like where this is going. I love that you mentioned the fruit company and the billfold.
Well, it was interesting to see too, because for how much money he had, to have something so simplistic as his money clip is kind of where he came from to where he is now.
Oh, that could be another reason. That being said, if you like what you heard, head on over to ratethispodcast.com/squawking-dead. 5 stars and a arrowhead is all we need to know. No, we're not doing that?
Seems offensive.
5 stars and a sealed up metal ball full of drugs.
This is all
So
we need to know,
specific.
that you love us, but tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. Remember to tell us after every single episode. And if you really like what you've heard, head on over to either ko-fi.com/squawking-dead or patreon.com/squawking-dead and just follow us. When you do, you'll be on the inside track of when we record. Usually, these are screeners recordings. It's unfortunately that we couldn't have you guys in this
And
studio.
hopefully we have
do like
screeners
it.
for everything. So I'm so sorry, but maybe that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, but you'll still get notified when our unedited episode recordings show up in your feed. And to that point, if you tip us on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/squawking-dead, you can get these unedited episode recordings for 30 days, as well as forever Discord access. If you happen to join a membership tier on either ko-fi.com/squawking-dead or patreon.com/squawking-dead, you will get more access to our Discord, more channels. You'll have freebies in the Ko-fi shop, as well as a ton of other cool free things that are locked up on either side, Patreon or Ko-fi. Join the Whispers, Survivors, or Great M tier. You'll get a free classic t-shirt upon signing up, as well as a whole bunch of other perks that you should definitely read up on. Join the Survivors or Great M tier. You can show up alongside us, breaking down these episodes along with us. And if you happen to join the Great M tier, the greatest this year, you can get access to our core channel, as well as any meetings that we have on any particular subjects, because you are basically the greatest dish tier, which means that you are a junior producer, essentially. So you have every right to be a part of these conversations, telling us what we have to do. Again, check out ko-fi.com/squawking-dead or patreon.com/squawking-dead. I've been your host, David Cameo, and I was joined by
Lazy Gardner.
And Bridget. You can also find me at ko-fi.com/punkybrewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER.
Can't wait to talk about the next episode. It's like
I'm getting ready to go watch it
quickly
right
past this.
now.
We love a
Yes.
mystery.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to go watch the
Well,
next
most
one
of the
right
time-
now because I got to be able to watch it twice for tomorrow.
By the way, today is March 1st. We're going to be recording the next episode March 2nd, and we're going to keep going like this until we can't. And then we have to wait, essentially. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. And again, if you can, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/squawking-dead, and enable notifications if you could. If you don't and you watch somewhere else, don't. But at least subscribe. That really is a free and excellent way to support the podcast without having to do anything at all aside
Plus,
from click a button.
If you don't care about where you watch things, like you're like, I'm currently watching you on Spotify, but you don't care, if you would switch to YouTube, that would be helpful, because we need our watch hours to go up so we can become monetized.
Yeah. But again, the subscribing alone really does help. It helps with visibility. It helps get our content out.
Do or do not. There is no
but like,
try.
do it though.
Yeah.
But really though, do it.
They really do it, right? As Bridget said. Dude, just do what Bridget says. I'm like the soft sell. Bridget's like, do it now.
Just
What are
go
you,
do
dumb?
it.
What are you,
Just go do
dumb?
it. What's the
Bye.
big deal?
You know what? Don't even watch it. Bridget will just like end up getting frustrated. Don't even watch it. What are you even doing here? Bye.
You know what? Sometimes I think sometimes people like it.
Like being negged by
Yeah.
Bridget, by a
They
ginger,
like it, I think.
an Irish farmer.
An Irish monster.
Irish monster. Thank you for making it to yet another discussion on Dark Winds. This one, the third episode of its third season, titled Chi'idi, which in Dene means ghosts. You've reached the portion of this podcast where we thank our Great M Survivors and Whispers members in that order. Starting with the Great M tier, we have at Real Ryan GM on Instagram and X. In the Survivors tier, we have Douglas Atherton at Walking Dead Artist 2 on Instagram. Among the Whispers, we have the following: at Eliza Jones 71 on Instagram. And on Facebook, we have at Kim.Rowley, the number 1. No housekeeping to speak of, but I just wanted to mention, because we recorded these episodes way in advance, and somewhere along the line, we did release finally the merch. We do have 2 lovely designs available in our store, namely the logo and art designs. You may have a favorite among them. You can get any one of those by heading to our website, squawkingdead.com, tapping the main menu in the top left and choosing merch. There have been various sales sales over the last few weeks, and you might just catch one. That would be $16 classic t-shirts and up to 35% off the rest of the store. I can't wait to show you what we have coming down the pike. We've already recorded the first 6 episodes, so we've got 3 more to go at the very least. Can't wait to receive the last 2 and record those as well. Hang tight, and just remember in the meantime that we are Squawking Dead.